Motel on Murder Mountain, Tennessee Horror Stories, American Giallo, Book 1. Written by Carl E. Miller. Narrated by David K. Aycock. Street Stalker. June 1974. Elkmont, Tennessee. It was a muggy night, and I was half asleep when I received an urgent-sounding phone call informing me that a string of murders had occurred at the Yellow Brick Motel, a run-down establishment that was home to a wide range of low-life degenerates. I immediately phoned my partner, Dave Rogers, who initially didn't answer, but he called me back several minutes later, and I gave him the details of what I knew at the moment. I've worked with Dave for 3 years now, and he has remained my only partner since I became an investigator in the spring of 1971. We had solved countless murders together, but for some odd reason I could sense that something was different when I spoke to him about the Yellow Brick murders. As far as I know, there are at least 3 men who were reportedly found dead in their rooms, their throats cut, I muttered in disbelief. Dave responded by asking, "What do you expect from a place like Yellow Brick?" He paused briefly. "Probably some drug deal's gone bad," he continued. "You may be right, but we still have work to do," I assured him. "I know. I will meet you at Yellow Brick in 20 minutes, he responded, and quickly hung up the phone. When I arrived at the motel, the uniforms had done a good job of taping off the area, keeping the rubberneckers at bay. I presented the front desk clerk with my credentials so I could begin my investigation. "Bill Landless?" the tiny man behind the counter asked, while comparing the photo from my ID to my actual face. "In the flesh," I responded with a bit of a grin. "My partner, Dave Rogers, will be here shortly. We will head up to the crime scene and begin our investigation if that's all right by you." He paused for a moment and finally said, "Absolutely," while handing me back my badge. When Dave finally arrived, he was sweating profusely and mumbling, "Let's get this over with quick. I get sick just thinking about the fucking trash that comes in and out of this building. Nothing but whores and drug peddlers," he exclaimed. I stared at him in disbelief. We have done this so often that it was puzzling to me to find my partner acting erratically. "You seem slightly off lately, like the work is getting to you. Maybe you're cracking up," I blurted. "Nonsense. I'm just to a point where it feels meaningless investigating these crimes," he exclaimed. Well, no sense debating this now. Not where a murderer is on the loose, I thought. When we got to the first room, the door showed no signs of forced entry, and we entered the room of the victim. I immediately saw the man lying on the floor in a pool of blood, his throat cut. Nothing was broken in the room, but the phone line was cut, and the only other oddity was that his money was still in his wallet, along with a small folded piece of paper which read ELSA on the front and had a phone number on the back. After staring at the note for a moment, I handed it to my partner. "Maybe his wife?" I suggested. Dave shrugged, dismissing my guess. "Most men don't forget their wife's number," he exclaimed. "This is a local number. Why would he need a motel if he lived in this area?" Well, you make some valid points, and there is only one way of figuring out who else he is, I thought. "All right, head down to the front desk and call the number. Let's identify who this person is. I'm going to check out the other rooms," I was saying, but my partner had already left the room before I could finish the sentence. I began my way to the second victim's room when I saw a man fumbling with his keys and appearing to be very nervous. "Excuse me, sir. I need to ask you a few questions," I said in a rather demanding voice, while reaching for my badge to present to him. "How can I help you?" he said with a put-on, crooked smile, while obviously sizing me up. He was an intimidating-looking character. He stood about 6 feet 4 inches tall and probably weighed 250 pounds or so. He looked like a crazed mafia henchman and was likely violent and unpredictable, so I stayed several feet back and flashed my badge. "There were some murders here last night. Can you tell me what you know? Was there anything out of the normal that you saw?" I asked, and without hesitation he shook his head and began to turn away. "But just a second. What's your name? I need it for my report. I'm speaking with everyone in the building that I can," I said. "Sonny Bulgaro, but that name isn't going to help you. I just checked into my room. I have been in town for less than 2 hours. So if you wouldn't mind, kindly fuck off, would you?" The wood jet was emphasized and seemed to be more of a challenge than a question. I sensed the confrontation would become ugly if it continued, so I simply thanked him and suggested we may meet again. When I arrived at the second victim's room, again there was no sign of forced entry, and the phone line was cut. The only noticeable difference was the victim was in the bed rather than on the floor, but his throat had an identical cut, a very wide cut, likely from the same unique blade. I checked the victim's pockets and found nothing, not even a wallet. I inspected the rest of the room and noticed a dresser drawer partway open. I glanced inside, and there it was, quite possibly the most important piece of evidence in the room. Inside was a note that said ELSA, and on the back the same number as the note from the last victim. I continued to search the room, but that was it, the only real clue we had. As I was playing out scenarios in my head of who this mystery lady could be, my partner began entering the room. "No answer, but don't get discouraged," he said. "The man at the front desk said he knows of a local girl named Elsa. Says she frequents this place often, with various men. In fact, he said that she accompanied our first victim to his room last week and stayed overnight with him." "So, she's a hooker. Then she should be relatively easy to track down," I said. "Exactly. Actually, I may already have a lead. Remember I told you a few weeks back that some concerned people in the neighborhood had been complaining about some new whore in town?" he asked. I shook my head. "Well, I told you about it. Maybe you weren't listening," he insisted. "Well, that's probably because keeping up with the current streetwalkers is not my line of work, but that may have just changed. So, Dave, while you made the phone call, I was examining this room and found yet another note with the name Elsa and the same number," I said, while holding up the note. My partner seemed to stare into space for an instant, and then said, "Let's check out the last room, and then we will backtrack and call it a night. We can begin our search for Elsa in the morning." I nodded as I began to walk to the last victim's room. Thinking of the process that will come in the following days, I became anxious and hopeful to find solid evidence in the third victim's room. The first two victims were both residing on the second floor, while the third victim was on the third floor. I took the stairs up a level, and in the stairway I saw dozens of cigarette butts, as well as blood on the handrail. I continued towards the room. The door handle was damaged, like there had been a struggle to get through the door. As I walked in, I saw this victim was also on the floor, and shared the exact same cut on the neck. His pockets were empty, his wallet and keys on a table near the bed, no identification inside but full of cash, maybe $600. Something else was different. I continued looking but didn't find it. What I did see was Dave walking in the room. I looked at him with a confused gaze, and finally I said, "There's no note. I looked everywhere." Dave began to search along with me until he finally said, "Let's head out. We will track Elsa down tomorrow and go from there. On the way out, we can have the front desk put these 3 rooms on lockdown once the forensic guys and the body snatchers are done." I agreed, and then suddenly I remembered to tell Dave about my encounter with Sonny. I forgot to mention I ran into some psychopath piece of shit on the second floor when you were making the phone call. I questioned him, but he said he wasn't here last night and had just checked in. His name is Sonny Bulgaro, and he looked like some criminal. Dave listened and said, "We will check him out tomorrow." We told the front desk to keep people out of the rooms where the crimes occurred, and asked to be informed if Sonny left his room. Something was strange about Sonny, but so far he didn't fit the puzzle, as the front desk confirmed he just checked into the motel today, after arriving from out of town and being picked up by their own shuttle service. Even without sufficient evidence, I was still interested in what made Sonny so nervous, and I still considered him a very likely suspect due to the circumstances of our initial encounter. When I woke up, I gave Dave a call, and he sounded excited, informing me that he had a lead on Elsa and would be tracking her down within the hour. She shacked up with Duke, he said. I knew who Duke was, a wannabe cult leader hillbilly who lived about 2 blocks from the Yellow Brick Motel. Duke was a memorable person simply because of the stable of women who would be at his house at any given time. It made sense that a new streetwalker in town would naturally be attracted to Duke's house. I immediately made my way to Duke's to meet my partner, but it was too late. By the looks of Duke, furious in the street, My partner must have already arrived and hauled Elsa away. I approached the Duke. "Did Dave come by here?" I asked. "You know goddamn well he did, and he better bring my girl back fast," he exclaimed. "Your girl is now being investigated for the murder of 3 men," I said, before dismissing him and making my way toward the station to assist Dave with interrogating Elsa. On the way to the station, I thought about the possibility of Duke being the killer. In many ways, he fit the profile. He smoked, which would account for the cigarettes in the stairway, and he also lived so close and has a relationship with Elsa. As I neared the station, I spotted Dave's black Cadillac parked in front. I immediately rushed inside and found the front room empty, but I could see a shadow coming from the side room. The shadow was of a large figure in the motion of striking, and then I heard a whack, followed by a loud scream and a helpless begging. "Please stop hitting me. I haven't done anything," she said. I was shocked at what I witnessed. I worked with Dave for 3 years, and I have known him and his family for over a decade. That being said, never once have I seen him strike another human, let alone a woman who we aren't even sure is guilty of murder. "Step away from the woman. Stand down," I demanded. "She's a fucking killer, Bill. I'm certain of it," he pleaded. I collected my thoughts briefly before finally saying, "Dave, go home and cool down. Take the rest of the day off. I will finish up with the questioning." He seemed to understand and muttered, "Fine. I need a drink anyway," as he marched past me and exited the station. I looked down at the worn-out and tired-looking woman who was lying on the floor. She looked like she could clean up nice and pass as a beautiful businesswoman. "I take it you are Elsa?" I asked as she nodded. "Look, I'm sorry my partner struck you. I assure you that was out of character for him. He is a man of faith and never behaves in that manner," I said, while noticing her face was swelling and red. "I'm used to being hit, but if you wouldn't mind, I would like to leave now so I can go ice my face," she suggested. "I'm afraid not. I'm going to need some answers before you can go anywhere," I informed her. She frowned and said, "What a drag," and then asked, "Well, can I at least have a cigarette?" I responded quickly, "I don't smoke, sorry." She looked around and said, "That's fine. I will just take one of your partner's cigarettes that he left, the least he can do for assaulting me." My partner? I thought back, trying to remember a time I witnessed him smoking. "Impossible. My partner doesn't smoke," I said, while she held the pack of cigarettes firmly in her hand. "These fell out of his pocket as he beat me, and I'm going to smoke one," she stated, while lighting one of the cigarettes. "I can't allow this to sidetrack the investigation. If Dave has a secret cigarette intake, that is his own business," I thought. "Look, Elsa, 3 men were found dead at Yellow Brick, and 2 of the victims had a note that contained your name on the front and your number on the back," I said, while examining her facial expressions. She seemed concerned. "I know you're new to town, and I had a brief rundown of your occupation. You're a prostitute who frequents the local streets near the motel." I paused for a moment before continuing. "The front desk confirmed you were the last person seen with one of the victims. Now I need you to tell me every detail you remember," I ordered. "I didn't kill anyone. I'm just a whore, not a killer. I have some morals. I just skipped out of the last town I was in because I was assaulted by a psycho who kept stalking me. I came here looking for a new start," she proclaimed, while quietly sobbing and reaching in her pocket, pulling out a tissue and applying it to her face to wipe away the flow of tears. "I met up with a few people at Yellow Brick. We had fun, and when it was over, I left, and they were just fine. In fact, they were more than fine," she said in a seductive way, while appearing to have suddenly changed personalities completely, and crawled closer to me while still smoking. "I need the truth right now. I don't have time for games. Did you see anyone who looked out of the ordinary at the motel? Did anyone seem suspicious?" I questioned her while she shook her head with certainty. "What's the name of the guy who was stalking you in the town you skipped out of?" I asked. "Sonny Bulgaro. He's my former pimp and boyfriend who became mad with power. He became a made member in a large mafia family and lost his mind. He turned violent and aggressive," she said in a rather panicked voice. I thought for a moment before informing her that Sonny is staying at the Yellow Brick. "He must have tracked me down somehow. He has so many connections. Someone must have spotted me and told Sonny where I was," she said in a hysterical cry that did not seem exaggerated. this guy Sonny capable of killing? I asked. She nodded. I said he's in the Mafia. What do you think? My mind began to wonder at the possibilities of Sonny being the killer. I mean, I thought it was a possibility from the first moment I saw him, and now it seems near certain. The chances a made man comes to town, stalking his hooker girlfriend, while a string of murders happen surrounding her, not being linked together, are slim to none. Look, Elsa, I want to believe you. So far your story is adding up, but I need more information. Is it possible that Sonny has been in town for 2 or 3 days? Because if so, he could be a suspect in the murders, I explained. I haven't seen Sonny in 3 weeks, maybe a month. Seems to follow me. And Sonny drives a black car, she said. A lot of big kids around that. Hell, my partner brought you here in a black car, I told her, while she seemed confused. You mean your partner who beat me? He brought me here in a green car, she said confidently. A green car? I thought to myself. I knew who it belonged to, Dave's wife, but I couldn't wrap my head around why Dave was using his wife's car. Excuse me for a moment, I said, while making my way to the front of the station. I looked out the window, seeing his car still there. Well, must be something wrong mechanically, I thought, and his wife let him borrow her vehicle. I proceeded back towards Elsa. Well, he usually drives a black car. My point is, so do many other Americans, I said, as she agreed. I explained to Elsa she would have to remain within city limits until the investigation was over, and she didn't attempt to argue. I released her after the interrogation and headed home so I could process the information I had, and phoned to Dave to see if he was up to meeting me at Yellow Brick in the morning. Sure, but you have to come pick me up. My car is out of commission, and my wife needs her car back, he said. I will be there to pick you up in the morning, as long as you have cooled down, I exclaimed. Dave audibly sighed and hung up. I arrived at Dave's early in the morning, and we began driving towards Yellow Brick. Dave lit a cigarette. So it's true. You're a smoker now, I asked. I've always been. I just cut back while I worked, but the stress has led me to not caring, he replied. We both remained silent for the rest of the drive. When we got to the motel, he finally spoke. Back to Scum Central, he said, while chuckling to himself. We both walked in and proceeded towards the front desk, but it was no longer the tiny man from our previous visit to the motel. Welcome back, the tall man behind the counter said, while eyeing my partner. We're going to head up to the crime scene, where you may have missed some clues, Dave said, while flashing his identification. Go right ahead, sir, the man replied. As we walked towards the first victim's room, I looked at Dave and asked, what did he mean, welcome back? Have you seen him before? Dave nodded, saying, he was talking to both of us. He remembered when we were here during our initial investigation. Well, I personally never saw him before. There was a different, I began to say, but couldn't even finish the sentence. I was interrupted at the sight of Sonny Bulgaro. Sonny, we need you to come to the station for questioning. Don't even think about running, I shouted down the long hallway. Sonny turned with an evil glare and simply stated, I don't run. The day I have to run from some pig, I will call it quits, he gloated. Luckily, he didn't put up a fight, and we escorted him to the station. When we arrived at the station, I didn't hesitate to begin my questioning. Look, Sonny, I know you are here because of Elsa. She told us all about you stalking her, and he didn't hesitate to fire back. You would stalk the whore too if she stole $10,000 from you, he said, as he clenched his fist in rage. Well, I have no idea about any of that. What we want to know is why 3 of our customers have been murdered at the motel you are staying at, I stated. Sonny seemed totally oblivious to what I was saying. He was focused on my partner, who was finishing his cigarette. Dave, give him a cigarette, I shouted. Would you like a cigarette, Sonny? He smiled. Well, I'm more of a cigar smoker, but sure, why not? He replied while looking fiercely into my eyes. I watched as Dave handed in a cigarette. He examined it closely before lighting it. Haven't smoked a cigarette in years, he boasted, but his tone was different, and I couldn't tell if he was being genuine. Well, that was my last cigarette. Now I need to use your car to head up to the corner store, Dave said. Fine, here's the keys. Grab Sonny here a cigar. I haven't got a feeling he's going to be here a while, I said, while looking at Sonny. His confidence seemed to have vanished completely. After Dave left, I continued questioning Sonny. Are you sure you don't want to officially revise the previous statement you gave me when we spoke at Yellow Brick? I asked, but he remained silent as he finished his cigarette. I've got all day, I assured him as he nodded, seeming to understand the situation he was in. I was thinking about a way to trick him into talking, and suddenly I heard the front door of the station open. Hello, a familiar voice said. I turned to look, and it was Duke and Elsa. Duke, what can I do for you? I asked. I'll tell you what you can do. You can arrest that piece of shit no-good partner of yours for murder, he shouted. A friend of mine stopped by my house, and he said he saw Dave follow Elsa into the Yellow Brick last week and leave a few hours later, wearing a ski mask and gloves. He put the mask and gloves into his trunk and took off in his black Cadillac. I felt overwhelmed and confused. Oh, this can't be true, I said, while dismissing his claim. I pushed him out of my way and walked over to Dave's desk. His car keys were laying underneath the notepad, and on the notepad was written, Elsa, over and over again, page after page. I began sweating and grabbed the keys while rushing to Dave's car. I said a silent prayer while I opened his trunk, and then my entire body went into shock. Jesus Christ, I yelled, and my prayer was over. In the trunk was Elizabeth, Dave's wife, with her throat cut, and near her feet was a ski mask and black leather gloves. I slammed the trunk closed and ran back into the station. I looked at the pictures of Dave's family that were above his desk, and I began to cry. Sonny and Duke both watched me, and I felt like I was having a nervous breakdown. I heard a door shut in the distance, and then the front door of the station open. It was Dave, holding cigarettes and a cigar. As he entered the station, he asked in a cheerful voice, All right, ladies, what's the score? I stared at him in anger. You sick fuck, I shouted, while standing up to face the monster who was once my partner. It's over, Dave. A witness saw you follow Elsa into Yellow Brick, and they saw you leave wearing a ski mask and gloves. And I've seen what you have in your trunk. You will hang for this, I said. Well, I had a good run. I cleaned up a lot of scum off the streets, he said proudly. Scum? You killed your wife for Christ's sake, I replied. My wife got what was coming to her. She was asking for it, he bragged, while laughing hysterically. Who would have thought I would end up in a room with a gangster, a hillbilly cult leader, and a filthy hooker? And I would be the biggest criminal, he asked, before reaching for his pistol and putting it to his head as he uttered one final sentence. Don't let her get in your head, too. No, not like this, I screamed. But it was too late. It was over. He pulled the trigger.